Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining. So this is the second part of the narrowing down, culling, and editing process from the Puffins outing. And so let's jump right into it. It's a rainy day here in Newfoundland, as you can see outside, so a perfect day to sit inside and edit some photos. So the last time we left off, I had narrowed down everything. I think it was like 500 and some photos down to we now have 60 photos. And so at this point, we're just going to pick out a handful of photos to do some basic edits with. I'm just going to go ahead and throw them all in a quick collection. So I'm just going to go through the thumbnails here for the most part. We'll grab like a low-key photo there. This guy looks kind of fun. Silhouetted in the sun looks pretty sweet as well. Then we got the sparkly bokeh stuff happening there. I think let's go with that one. Well, maybe not that one. Let's see what else we got. This one's like real nice with the soft light, so maybe we'll do that. And then we'll do a little bit of a stronger one here. Oh, actually, I kind of like this one with the sun in it, so we'll do that one. And then let's see. Let's take a look at some of these. Some of these had really interesting light and color. That one seems fun. Maybe I'll go through them like this a little bit just so I can pick out. I love the flower or the leaf over here on that one. Let's see what else is interesting. I guess one of these low-key images would be good. The flying in one. Let's see what else we got for that. I think that one's kind of the most interestingly lit one. Plus the puffins in the bottom. Yeah, let's try it. Oh, and some of these spotlit shots. This one will be fun with the grasses. I think we can fix that. That's a little bit mayhem. That one with all the birds flying around. I want to find one of these good spotlit ones. That's really nice. We'll clean that up. This one's really fun. And then there's the softer spotlight and then the soft light on the bird. There we go. So plenty of photos here. Let's head up to the quick collection. We got 15 photos. I'm just going to do all my edits here in Lightroom though. That's pretty much what I've been doing. You know, I used to have a really strict workflow of going from Lightroom for basic stuff, then going to Photoshop to really kind of fine tune it. But the masking has gotten so damn good in Lightroom, in my opinion, that it doesn't really. I don't see a need to go into Photoshop anymore, basically. Most of the time. There's still a few things that it does happen. So I'm just going to go through this pretty much real time here, guys. So first thing is straighten out the crop there. Shot that nice and crooked. I do, for the most part, leave my aspect ratio locked at the same original 2:3 aspect ratio that I start with. And for me on this photo, I really want to exaggerate the color differences here, the cool below and the warmer tones up top. So I'm going to just sort of edit for that cool below, since that's like most of the photo. I'm going to exaggerate the white balance a little bit more there. I'm going to lift the shadows because I wanted to see more in those in the puffin itself. Then I'm going to go ahead and throw a linear gradient on the bottom here. Let's see, and we're going to kind of try and match roughly this foreground there, and we'll drop the shadows on that. There we go. Get that nice and dark. I'm going to do a subject select. I am using shortcuts for these. I have shortcuts set up for them because I use these masks so much, but I'm telling you what I'm doing. And then I'm going to intersect that with a radial. Just a big soft radial like that, so our mask ends up being like not exactly what I wanted. See, I should have checked this first. So let's delete that. Subject select kind of screwed me there. Let's try an object select just with the marquee. Let's see if we can get the whole bird here. It does love to mix it up sometimes and split that. So there we go. Now we got the whole thing. Now I'll intersect that with a radial, and that gives me the soft sort of fall off that I'm looking for there instead of that hard line at the bottom. Now I can lift that up, and boy, we don't want that bird that blue. So let's see. We're going to lift the shadows, drop the blacks. Probably a little bit too light on those shadows. Maybe slightly less blacks. Then I'll do another object select. See if we can get that whole bird again. There we go. And I'm going to warm that white balance up because puffins are not neon blue. Now, the lighting is early dusk. It's got a blue vibe. Like, I don't want to neutralize this. Like, the last thing I want to do is like completely clean up, you know, make like a neutral white balance like that. It just looks absurd. But I didn't want the bird like that. He's just like way too blue there. So I'm going to warm it up just a little bit, and then I'll probably do a little bit of a desaturation on the blue using point color here, and just see if we can tone it down just a little. That feels like a good balance there. There's a little bit of yellow sort of coming in on the bottom there of the bird, so I'll subtract a linear on that. and just kind of blend that a little bit nicer. So last thing, add another linear on the top here. Just going to hit this with some dehaze. It should bring out a little bit more of those clouds and colors, and then we'll go ahead and warm it up. And there we go. There's our first edit. On to the next one. Some of these should be simpler. Let's crop this in just a little bit. There. I do find this one piece of grass is just a little too big and obnoxious, so I'm just going to use the remove tool to get rid of that. And it left one little piece, so we'll just grab that. Nope. Let's try again. We'll refresh with that. There we go. Clean that up nice. All right. So I think again we're just going to do a subject select. Let's see what happens here. There we go. And then intersect with that radial. Just try and keep the adjustments mostly to the head there. I want to just brighten the head up a little bit and do that. Then we'll do a background select. I want to make that background just a little bit richer. I'll subtract the linear off the bottom there so the rocks don't go too dark. And then we'll just kind of blacken that out just a little bit more. And then a linear on the top to just completely black it out. Should do the trick. There we go. So before, after. Nice basic edit on that one. Made them look good. Just trying to think of composition. I don't know if I want these grasses to come in down there, so I'm just going to clip that out just to kind of clean it up a little bit. I like them, but I wanted to see more of them if they're going to be there. And then for this one, there's just like a lot of empty space up in the sky there, so I'm going to actually do a little bit more of a pano crop on that. This doesn't seem to be like need much work for exposure, so I'm going to lighten the shadows up a bit here just to try and get that blue to show a little bit more. Maybe a drop in the highlights to richen that. Drop the blacks. That's looking good. And now it's starting to show some detail in the puffin, which I don't particularly want. So we'll do an object select and then just leave him as a nice silhouette. So we'll just drop those shadows back down. And then same thing on this rock down here. We're starting to see some in there. So we'll just drop those shadows down there. Maybe the blacks a little bit. Something like that. So there we go. So we've gone from there to there. And that's it. I just wanted to kind of get a little bit more out of the water on that one. This one's really cool. Let's crop it somewhere in there. So you guys notice I'm not using a grid at all. I just like sort of letting the image determine how I'm going to crop and how it feels balanced and everything. So I don't really use the grid. So I'm going to lift up the exposure, lift up the shadows so we can get more detail there. We can actually start to see the separation on the puffin and his legs. And notice we blew the sun out. But since we started that exposure really dark, real easy. Check this out. Look at that. Just a highlight drop brings those nice rich tones back into that sun. And now we actually have, I can probably go further with the shadows, get a little bit more separation in there. Drop that highlight back down again. That's too far. So like that looks weird. So we want to find that sweet balance of good color and not looking too bizarre, which I would say is right there. Let's try a subject select, see if it gets our bird. It does. And then we're just going to blacken him out. I didn't like the flare that was happening around there. And then I'm going to subtract the linear off the bottom just to let those legs and a little bit of glow that's happening there show a little bit more. And now it changes my crop. So there, now I can give him a little bit more space on the legs and show something like that. I'll zoom in here. It's just getting a little bit light around that head. So again, I'm just going to do subject select, intersect with radial. Just drop the blacks, get that nice crisp edge on that silhouette, and we are good to go. Look at that. Pretty cool. I'm digging it. All right, on to the next one. This one I do want to see the bird a little bit more, so I'm going to try and lift up the shadows a little bit here, but then it's bringing up too much detail everywhere else. So, and I'm also using shortcuts for this, which, by the way, anybody interested, it's an app called Power Keys on the Mac. I don't know if they make a Windows version, but what it allows me to do is adjust basically any of these sliders with keyboard shortcuts, which is really nice. So watch, I can lift up the exposure, drop the exposure, I can lift the shadows, I can drop the blacks, bring the blacks back, drop the shadows. Like all of that happened that fast just by me hitting keyboard shortcuts. And so I find that A, faster. Once you memorize the keyboard shortcuts that you've assigned, you get to assign them, by the way. And B, I find that it's nicer because I get to keep my eye on the image while I'm adjusting stuff instead of having to kind of go over here, look at the slider, back to the image, move the slider, back over here, find the next slider, that kind of thing. So I just like adjusting things by keyboard shortcut like that, and it works really, really well for me. But On this one, I think the crop is pretty good already. Maybe I could use a little bit less ground and a little bit less of that blue water on the right-hand side. So something like that feels pretty good. And then I want to lighten up that puffin, so I'm going to do a subject select, intersect with radial again. Big radial on this one. So here's the deal, right? The radial does that, the subject does that, you get the intersection of both, you get that. And watch, now it lets me naturally lighten up my bird. Lift up those shadows, drop the black so it doesn't get too washed out, maybe somewhere in there. Let's try maybe a little highlight lift. That's good. And then we'll just do, let's see if select sky grabs that background for me. Perfect. A little bit of bird in there, so we'll subtract subject out of it, and then that should clean that up. Excellent. So I want a little bit more out of that background, so we're going to dehaze it. It went a little bit cyan, so we'll warm it, a little bit magenta back in there to keep the same rosy tones, and then maybe just a little bit of a, yeah, there we go. A little bit of pop of like that, the whites just gives me a little something more on that background. Yeah, I like that. Cool. Moving right along. Sun's overexposed on this one. I'm not going to worry about trying to recover it. If I try and do anything like that or like worse like that with the white slider, it just turns like a funky gray and it looks awful to me. So I'm just going to let that go light. So we're going to lift our shadows up, drop our blacks, linear gradient on the bottom, drop those shadows. I don't want to see all that grass down there. Just a little bit of it's fine. Let's get rid of that bird poop there. Fix our crop. It's a little bit less than ideal with the composition there. Subject select, intersect with radial. Let's go ahead and drop those blacks so he doesn't look so washed out and like weak. Let's do one more subject select, intersect with radial just around the head here. That way I can lift up the highlights, maybe the exposure a little bit. Cool off the white balance so he's less yellow in the face. And then let's try a little pop of whites there. Let's see what that does. That's pretty good. And then I do want a little bit more blue in the water where it's not sparkling. So linear gradient right here. Subtract linear gradient off the bottom there. So that should get me most of my water without the grass. And then we'll do, let's do subtract with a radial to get rid of the golden glow in the middle there. So a shape like that seems pretty accurate for it. Close enough anyway. I'll expand this out just a little bit more, and then we'll drop the feather on it a little bit so we can kind of protect that middle section there. So there we go. Like we pretty much got the water isolated. And so if I just kind of cool that off with the white balance there, we can get a nice rich blue. I went a little too far there, something like that. And we'll think about just richening up that sky a little bit, maybe a little dehazing that to show some more of those cloud formations. It's too dark with the sky, so let's back off of that. There we go. So something like that I think works. Before, after. Check that out. Pretty cool, right? All right. Also, just notice the bird is too blue overall. So I'm just going to white balance him. Ooh, that made it worse on the head. So let's do a point color, grab that blue, desaturate that blue a bit. That should clean up some of that. It looks like I need to get some of this blue over there. Oh, that color's already been sampled, I've been told. Same thing there. All right, I guess I can just desaturate it more then. Yeah, I mean, that looks better. Way less blue in the middle of his breast there. There we go. Cool. Done with that photo. Moving right along. This is another one where it's just like, it's on the verge. So I'm going to lift the shadows a little bit, drop the blacks. That looks pretty good. I don't mind some of the bokeh in the grasses here. So I'll just, I don't want them that bright, you know. Another subject select, intersect with radial. I want to keep that feather maxed out. Let's lift up those shadows, warm that up a little bit. Actually, no, I'm going to do the blue on the whole bird. So we'll lift up that exposure, shadows, drop the blacks. Somewhere in there looks good. Do another subject select. Hopefully we get the whole bird. And then let's just do point color's been working quite nicely there, I think. So we'll grab that blue and just kind of mellow that out. And maybe we'll actually warm the white balance on the whole bird. That's better, actually. and then we can bring some of that blue back in. There we go. And then we just want to, again, exaggerate that background. So I'm just going to warm that up a little bit more golden, drop the exposure a little bit more rich. Right side's going to get a linear for more blue. Get more of that over there. Not quite that much. And then, boy, I'm just not sure about the eye now. Like the head and the eye. Like, do I want to see that much of it or less of it, you know? So maybe we just back off the amount on that. Yeah, I think let's leave it darker and moodier. That way I don't have a desire to really see the detail in the eye there. And it's closer to the original. And in fact, maybe I'll just back off the shadows entirely. Yeah, that's it. Something like that feels better overall. Cool. This one, I do want to just keep him a silhouette, so I'm just going to keep the contrast up. But we're going to lift the exposure, drop the blacks, lift the highlights to try and get a little bit more out of that. Shadows up on the right side is what I want. I want to show off that. Actually, I'll just do exposure over there. Exposure and black drop should keep my contrast, but lighten it. And then a little bit more blue tone for the gradient there. And then let's just clone out that weird dust spot. And then maybe the weird, just one feather that's catching some light there. And then maybe these guys down here, but I can just actually just drop a linear there and blacken that out for the most part. There we go. So done with that one. Nice and easy edit from there to there. I did lose a little bit in that left side there. So where did that? I thought I dropped a linear over there, but maybe not. Let's drop that in on that side and darken it. Maybe highlight recovery. There we go. That gets us that richness back. So now we're going from there to there. That's better. Yeah, see, it's always so good to do the before and after, I think, just so you can see where you were, where you started, where you came from, and where you went with it, right? All that good stuff. All right, so definitely want the bird to stand out the most. So I'm going to exposure up, shadows up, drop the blacks. That looks good contrast-wise overall. We're going to do just a background select and darken it a little bit more with just the blacks and the exposure. I don't want to go pure black back there because I think that's just going to look weird, you know. Obviously on the bottom it would look weird. So somewhere in there works. We'll do a subject select. Let's see if it got the whole bird. It did. That's great. But I'm just going to intersect with a radial on the head there so we can get a little bit more out of the head. I know their faces are actually more gray, but it just always makes them look a little like dull to me. So I try to sort of counteract it. And then we got to figure out this rock. So let's see. Let's try selecting landscape and see if it can get just that rock section for me there. Let's see. Mountains. Look at that mountain. Perfect. That does the trick. It had something going on over on the left, so I'm just going to drop a subtracted gradient off of that. So we should have just there. And now we can darken, warm, maybe drop whites to mellow it out. There we go. But what we don't want to do is go so far that his feet look like absurd, like standing out on that. But I think that's all. I think that's all legit. And I'm just going to throw a radial around this sort of light spot back there. Drop highlights, drop whites, maybe exposure overall, something like that. So there we go. Before, after. And then he got a little cool overall. So we're going to warm that white balance a little bit. And we're good to go. All right, moving right along this one. The only thing that's super weird on this is that I think it's another bird in the background getting lit out of focus. So I'm not really sure how to clean that up. Well, that's a tough one. I'm just trying to think. Because if I use this tool, it's going to just probably blend and smear the edges weird. This is just the erase tool. I can't imagine, yeah, that did. I mean, if I force it to take from down here. Yeah, it's still doing like an awful job. I guess maybe I can just do a straight clone. Actually might work the best. So let me zoom in further than I normally would and try and follow these feathers there. And then go right along that edge. And then we'll fill this in. As far as I recall, this tool, as soon as you let go, you can't add to it, which is really annoying. So I have to do this all in one shot. So we'll just paint that in. And I do want to make sure I just overlap the whole area quite a bit. And then we'll take from down here, and then let's hide that so we can see. Come on, there we go. I mean, I think when I zoom out, that's going to probably do the trick. So let's go back out to 100%. Yeah, that works. Totally works. All right, cool. So I think a vertical composition makes the most sense on this, but that's like a little off there. So I'm just going to go maybe like that. Then I also need to go ahead. I'm going to go back to just the regular erase and get rid of peeking puffin head there. And then this corner right there. Only because I don't want to crop any lower. I'm already kind of clipping his foot there. I like this guy peeking and the rest of them kind of sitting down there just waiting to see what's going on. So now it's going to be all about like an object select on this guy. Hopefully we get, pretty good on most of them there. I'm going to say exposure up, highlights up, shadows a little, good bit. The blacks are touchy. Let's warm it so it looks like he's getting that nice glow. And I'm going to exaggerate this. I'm going to lift the exposure even more. Maybe not the highlights. No, the highlight was nice. There we go. I think that's it. Before, after. So this is where that before and after comes into play, right? Like some of that selection there was no good right there. So subtract with a brush. Let's make sure the feather is pretty low. Size is small. And we're just going to go ahead and clean that edge up around those feathers so we don't have that extra weird glow sticking out. And then this is probably included in it as well. Again, I think it's part of that background bird, so I'm just going to subtract it to make it just stay darker back there. And then we're good to go. So before, after, much better. He really stands out. I like that a lot. Cool. All right, guys, moving right along. I think we only have a handful more here. These should be pretty basic too. I think something like that. White balance is really too cool here. So I wanna like bring that golden sun in, so we're gonna get that white balance nice and warm, something like that. And then I think we'll lift the exposure a tiny bit, but the highlights, no, not the highlights. Maybe just a touch on that. Shadows up, blacks drop. Subject select, hopefully gets our puffin. It did great. Let's do a intersect radial, but keep it narrow and sort of more to the whole left side here. And actually, let me go taller so I can keep it more towards the head there and get some fall off. There we go. Just that little bit I think is all it needed. And then let's try, boy, I don't know how I'm going to get this. I want to get the background minus the grasses. So select background gives me that, which is all good. But then how do I get those grasses out? Let's try subtracting a color range, maybe. So now, no, that got rid of way too much of the background. So subtract color. I'll try it one more time. I'll zoom in, make sure I get the bright golden stuff there. But it's still taking far too much out. So that's not doing the trick. Subtract luminance range, maybe. Let's get rid of the whiter stuff. No, maybe I need to go the other way. This one's always confusing when you do a add and subtract with it. So if I do this, there we go. If I bring that in, it's sort of, I think, working. So there's my final mask. Yeah, it's still not working that great, but let's try this. Add, brush, and then we'll just get a big brush and just kind of paint in these other spots that I want. And this is a jacked up mask. But we'll see what happens in the end. Basically, I wanted to cool off the background, you know? But I can't think of an easy way of doing that without interfering with those grasses is the problem here. But I'm wondering, let me feather this up a good bit. I'm wondering if the mask is just gradual enough that it won't matter. So like watch, if I cool that off in the background, I want to get those like blue tones back in there. So that's pretty cool. I mean, it kind of worked. Before, after. And then I just have to add, oh wait, no, subtract with another brush this tiny little thing. This little piece of grass just got included in there. And I think if I subtract him, there we go, we can get that more golden color back on. So there, that kind of did the trick. That worked. All right, so our before, after It really just helped. Yeah, I wanted like that more golden front and bird, and then kept the cooler background, which is fun. This one's real straightforward. So watch, we're just going to lift up the exposure, highlights back down to maintain detail, shadows up for more detail in our blacks. It washes it out, and then we drop our black slider. That gives us our contrast back and keeps our color tone incredibly rich. And there's a little bit of a vignette there, so I'm just going to crop in tighter. A little bit of a vignette and that shadow on the bottom, just from a ridge nearby. So we'll just crop in extremely close, and there we go. Nice, clean portrait, beautiful details on it. This one's really fun. I'm gonna just cool the whole thing off, lift the shadows a little bit, drop those blacks, maintain that contrast. Let's edit this for the watercolor and everything. So something like that works well. Compositionally, I feel like it's just a touch crooked, but I kind of like where it's at, so it doesn't need much. And then we'll do a subject select. It should get just our bird there, but whatever. It got both, and then I'll intersect with a radial. And then I can warm this back up to make it feel like that extra golden tone of the sun hitting there, which is kind of the tone it had in the beginning. So before, after, look at that. Love the color balance. Going to do a quick erase with this section here, I think. Let's see, why is it not working? There it is. Just try and clean up the bird crap right there. Almost had it all. And there we go. That should do the trick. Nice. This one's just got that same natural spotlight. So let's go warm on the white balance for the bird. Let's pop that up just a little bit with the lights here. Lift up the shadows a little bit. Drop those blacks. And then a background select should totally do the trick to give me that water. And then I can just get that back to that nice rich blue. So look at that. Before, after, a little bit of a dust spot right there. Clone that out, and we're done. This nice last soft light one, I'm going to start just like cloning out those couple of specks on him. Fix this composition a little bit so there's a little bit more space in front of the direction he's looking. Boy, guys, just lift the shadows, drop the blacks for contrast. So watch what this does just on its own. Just that shadow lift and black drop. Watch before and after. See how we got more detail in the blacks here, but the blackest values kind of stay put, because if I don't add the blacks in here, yeah, it shows me more detail there, but it's just washed out. I've lost contrast, saturation, color. It just looks like super faded. So by dropping those blacks, I get to maintain, like, basically watch before, after. Like, see how the color and contrast has basically stayed unchanged there, except I've gotten more detail and more contrast out of my black values. And if I wanted more, I could lift those blacks even more and just keep counteracting it, right? I can go further with that and watch. See how, again, it's basically leaving everything else, for the most part, changed. Sorry. So I think that's a little too much on the shadow, so I'll back off of that. I'm going to give the whole thing a little hit of saturation here. I feel like this section of the puffin could use just a little bit more detail, so I'll object select that, drop the highlights there, and then we'll just do a background select for that water, and I'm going to add just a hint of blue, but I'm also going to lighten it because I want to keep it just like a real light wash of blue there. So before, after, look at that. So I feel like it just like elevates the whole thing a little bit. So before, after, that's total before and after. And I think that's it, right? So there we go. That's everything edited. We just did 15 photos in a half hour. Not bad. Plus, we picked them out in the beginning. I'm going to let these previews render real quick, and then I'll bring up all these photos on the screen to show them to you at the same time so we can see there's our final edits across the board. We got a nice, diverse variety. Just a wonderful set of photos here, starting all the way from dusk before the sunrise, some playing with silhouettes, playing with a sparkly backlight, playing with dramatic backlight against a dark background, and then messing with some front lit stuff to get some interesting lighting effects, both strong and really soft. For just a totally wide variety of portraits here. And we have everything from a little bit smaller in frame, like here, here, and here, especially the flight shot, all the way to, can't even fit the bird in there, close shots as well. So let me know in the comments if you want, what's your favorite photo out of this? And let me know if you liked any of these editing techniques. Hopefully I gave you something new to kind of check out there. If you're interested in learning more about what I do and how I edit this stuff, there's a few options for me. You can head to my website to find out all of it under the learning menu. And I have an online course that teaches you all of this stuff in Lightroom, but I also have mentorship courses where I can show you that directly working one-on-one with me or with you submitting some photos. So a few options there. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed all of this video process from the capturing out in the field, which was really fun, an amazing morning, all the way through to this final editing process. It's been fun having you along. I'll see you guys on the next one.